to our second training session in which we're going to go over the ICD-10 tools on the MediRegs platform. My name is Raylene Kishba, and I'll be taking you through the product demonstration today. I also have on the phone Lee McMillan and Christina Panos from the Walters Kluwer team who will be here to help with any technical issues. So let's just do a couple housekeeping items up front. Your line is muted, but we do encourage questions throughout the presentation today, and Christina will be calling those questions out. On the right-hand side of your screen, you have a Q&A panel that you can use to type those questions in. We're also really happy to answer questions after the call. There are not specifically handouts for today's presentation because I'm not really going through a PowerPoint presentation. I'm really going to be logging into the product and showing you how to move around. So I would encourage you to check in on the product later. There'll be a review that has some screenshots, and we'll also post the recordings for this and the previous recording session. But really, you just want to follow along on screen. Christina or Lee, there's one of you that might want to just hit your phone mute because I can hear some office noise in the background. So the agenda on our last session was to focus in on the ICD-10 coding resources. And we took a look at the ICD-10 codebook, the ICD-10 Explorer with the GEMS mapping, and we touched on some of the other guidance that's available from MediRegs regarding ICD-10. We also examined local and national coverage under ICD-10 and took a look at how to stay on top of ICD-10 changes with your email alerts that are part of your subscription. So throughout the call today, I'm going to have the assumption that you actually are already a MediRegs subscriber, but I realize we might have a few guests on the phone. You can use today as a way of taking a look at the product to decide if you want to join us. And if you do, we'll reach out to you after the call today and set you up with a demo of your own. So in the second session, we want to focus more on reimbursements and on coding. So I will go back through and show you where in the product the key ICD-10 resources are. You know what, I'm going to hit my, okay, that's better. I'm hearing an echo.
Yeah, Ray, it's actually your phone somehow. But odd.
Really, when I unmuted myself at the echo, you couldn't hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I will take a few minutes to show you where in the product the ICD-10 resources are, but we're going to try to stay a little bit more focused on PCS and reimbursement in our session today. And I do just want to preface with a couple of little slides, and again, these will be available afterwards. In July, CMS and the American Medical Association did a joint series of announcements to say that, in fact, ICD-10 will go live in October, but to reduce the burden on providers, there would be a relaxation of, quote, edits and audits of the medical coverage to prevent a huge backlog in claims due to insufficient specificity, because ICD-10 specificity is so much more increased under ICD-10. They subsequently issued an important clarification document that y'all should take a look at, but here's a quick review of it. And essentially it boils down to this. We're going to need to use valid ICD-10 codes. So you can't report the category or family code, the first three codes. You need to actually go all the way to the specified specificity, but you will be allowed to report the unspecified code as long as you're in the right family of codes. That will not cause a denial automatically. That does not change any existing medical necessity edits in place. So if there is deep specificity required based on a local or national coverage determination, that edit will still be in place. That's a lot, and it sort of really underscores the need to go back and read that yourself. But really, when we go through the demonstration today, I'll be pointing out the reportable code, which is the valid code. And that's what they're meaning when they say that you could use the unspecified or the left or the right, but it needs to be the actual full specificity reportable code. And then there was one other thing I wanted to point out. I'm going to show you the screens, but this review kind of highlights for you where in your MediRegs subscription you'll be able to find important resources. ICD-10 is not just one thing. It's regulatory, it's coding, it's reimbursement, it's coverage. So you'll want to keep an eye on your MediRegs alert. You'll want to take a look on the code book and guidance section of your left-hand navigation pane to find not just the code book, but also the guidance for Coder's Library, because that's really rich with additional information related to ICD-10. Under Lookup and Payment Tools, we'll talk about the ICD-10 Explorer tool and the MFBRG Grouper and Calculator. And then in terms of ICD-10, don't forget additional information, including the Medicare manuals, the local and national coverage determinations, and some content that you can add on from other vendors to your subscription. And then to get ready for ICD-10, there's already been thousands and thousands of documents published, and that will continue. So really staying on top of regulatory issuances from here forward, and particularly in this first quarter, is going to be really mission critical. So in my presentation today, I'll make sure I show you how to be sure that you're filtering for that content properly in your subscription. And then finally, I do just want to point out that I'm going to be demonstrating from the Audit and Revenue Resource Center because it has the full set of content, but most of what I'm going to be showing you is available in all the subscriptions, with the exception of the American Hospital Association content. The top-tiered product includes the AHA Coding Clinic for ICD-10, as well as the AHA Coding Handbook for ICD-10. Under ICD-9, we all call that the Faye Brown book. And it's not written by Faye Brown anymore, but this is a very useful book. CMS has indicated they won't be answering coding clarification questions this year. They've issued the code set. They will be talking about coverage. They will be issuing provider education materials, but not the kind of detailed questions that we're used to seeing in the coding clinic. So really, for this first year, the only place to get that real-time interpretation will be from the AHA. And so we are hearing from a lot of customers who are choosing for this year to upgrade their subscription. I'm not here to sell you on that. I just wanted to let you know that it's going to be in my demonstration today. If you don't see it in your left-hand navigation pane and it's important to you, you can have that conversation with us. So now I'm just going to spend the rest of my time in the product. Lee, can you see the Audit and Revenue Resource Center? Am I logged in properly and sharing?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Okay. So here's your Audit and Revenue Resource Center, and you might have the Compliance and Regulation Suite, and your tabs might be a little different. But if you look on the left-hand side, you're going to see very similar things in the drop-down menu. So the alerts that I talked about, the 2 lookup and payment tools that I discussed, the code books and guidance, all available here on your left-hand side. So as a very quick review, I'll take you into the ICD-10 code book. And I'm actually going to take you into the 2016 code book because that data set is about to come out. So the code book includes the official guidelines, and everyone, it's a best practice from AHIMA that you should read the guidelines once a year. And so now would be a good time to run through these titles just to make sure you understand all the esoterica of ICD-10 coding. Next is the tabular presentation of the ICD-10 diagnosis codes. And if you're familiar with ICD-9, the chapters look quite similar. The numbers are a little different, but the topics are in about the same order. And then when you tunnel into a particular chapter, you'll notice some features that we've created in our product that will make using the electronic book a little bit easier than your paper book. And I want to just point out 3 of those features right now. At the top of the product, when you land on a page, we've actually broken the book down by category or family. So that's the first 3 codes. So you have every code that starts with an S11, all the open wound of neck codes. Now S11 happens to land in chapter 19 and the injuries to the neck section. And if you're in your paper book, you might notice chapter and section instructions. We've created those on screen for you, and you can hit the little plus minus buttons to expand and collapse those instructions. So you're basically flipping back in the book to see all instructions related to this code that begins with an S11. And then you'll see the tree of codes. Now S11 does require 7-character specificity in order to be reportable. So your code is going to need, in this case, to end with an A, a D, or an F. So if you were to report an S11.01, that would be returned to you as not a valid code. If you were to report an S11.02, 011, that would be returned to you as a not valid code. You need to go all the way to the 7th character specificity. So that's the second feature of our book. We've bolded and actually printed the reportable code on screen with the full long description. Your paper book may actually only go to the 6th character with a star or a note, and then you have to kind of construct the code on your own. We've spelled that out for you. And then finally, we're adding this expand all, collapse all feature, which would allow you to see, because some of these pages are quite long, will allow you to see the entire page collapse to let you slowly tunnel into the code that you're interested in. And if you want to, you can expand the entire tree at once, collapse the entire tree at once, or just kind of walk your way in the way I just modeled. And while I'm on this page, let me just talk to you about the X's. So under ICD-10, this is a S11.80 is an unspecified wound. It does require the 7th character, even though it's only got 5 characters so far. So you're meant to put X's in the missing spots until you get to putting that ADS in the 7th spot. And so we've done that for you so you don't have to think that out. Now, the ADS are not the only 7th characters. You might find when you're in a different section of the book, a different category or family, that you see different 7th characters, which is why having that all in one spot on screen for you is really quite convenient. So that's the ICD-10 book. I do want to point out that it's fully searchable, and you may sometimes find yourself wanting to use the index instead of the chapter sections. The index is automatically included in your search. The indexes are quite large. So if you've landed in one of these pages, your first match button will jump you down screen to your highlighted search term, and then you can see the tabular presentation and tunnel into the code that you want to choose. So now let's go to the ICD-10 PCF book. I'm going to go to the Guidance for Coders library and show you where that lives here. So we have all your code books under this yellow heading right here. And I'm actually going to go into the 2016 book. So there are coding guidelines for PCS, just like there are for CM. And it looks like we ran short. There's a section for all codes that start with a 0, the med-surg. There's a section for all the codes that start with obstetric, section 1, and then it seems like there's some stuff missing. That's just because they didn't write guidelines for those other chapters. And again, if you're an inpatient coder, you should read the guidelines once a year, and now would be a darn good time to do that. There's also a reference manual in here. The reference manual is actually designed for IT professionals to understand how the code set functions, but I found it to be an extremely helpful book for myself to read. And the reference, if you've read it before, you'll notice for both the guidelines and the reference manual, there is a summary of changes. You want to know what's different between 2015 and 2016. There's also an index, works just like the other index that I showed you. And then finally, instead of a tabular presentation, there are chapter sections in the procedure coding system designated by the starting code. So med-surg are all the codes that start with a 0. Here's the imaging codes, all start with a B. And then when we go into the med-surg section, which is the main section that most people will be using, you'll notice that, again, we've got the book so that there's a page for each category, which is the first 3 characters. And in the med-surg section, the first 3 characters represent the chapter, 0. Then they represent the body system, like central nervous system, or lower arteries, or ear, nose, and sinus. Then the 3rd character is the root operation. And by now, if you're a PCS coder, you should know what all of those root operations are, but I'll show you a nice little cheat. Then when you tunnel into that page, you'll notice again that section, body system, and root operation repeated at the top. And then you'll see a table. There may be many rows of tables, but that will help you pick the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th code. So in this case, it's the body part, the approach, the device, and the qualifier. And so you start with a 090, and then you pick code from each section of the table, and you construct yourself a 7-character code. The only kind of reportable code in PCS is the full 7-character code. And just sort of like a check your answers, down here are all the codes you could actually create off of that table up above. Now, the way I really like to use this book is by keyword search. So let's say I know that I'm working on an external ear. It's right. And I'm just going to use an approach. I'll type in percutaneous. I don't even know what the root operation is. I can keyword search in here, and it will find me those pages, those categories that contain that body part and that approach. And so I can see my 13 matches, and there are all my root operations clearly displayed. And let's say now I'm interested in a replacement, so I can click in. And then MediRegs has a natural highlighting that occurs that helps me to sort of very quickly identify which area of the tables might be of interest to me. And in this case, I actually am trying to create a code that doesn't exist. So let me pick a different section, and you get the idea. So there I might be in a 095, then maybe it's a 0, and then it's a 3, and then I can see that the only options for device and qualifier are ZZ. And so there's an example of using the PCS book. Now, there are a number in the bottom of the procedure coding system chapter. There are a number of very useful tables and files that CDC and CMS have created, and I just want to show you what they are. If you're curious about what all the different numbers are and what they can mean, all the different 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th character, that's what the definitions table does for you. So you can jump down to any section, and you can see that extracorporeal therapies is always going to be number 3, and here's all these different options and the definitions of them. So this, for me, is a very interesting way of quickly understanding all that terminology, and it's also nice because it's keyword searchable. So you notice I just hit Control-F, and I searched on screen for the word creation, and I quickly found what I was looking for in this definitions table. The next table that's useful is the body key. Your language may or may not be the same as the doctor's language, which may or may not be the same as what PCS calls it. And so here is a way to translate terms from what the doctor might call it to what the actual wording is in the PCS coding system. This is also a very large table, so keyword searching in here might serve you. Next up, and you notice I'm in the book and I'm hitting the next document button. That's one of the nice things about having an electronic code book. You can flip pages just like you do in your Kindle. Next is the device key, because the name of a medical device, as according to the manufacturer, may not obviously translate to you to what it's called in the PCS code system. So the AccuLink carotid stent system is an intraluminal device. And so now you know to use that keyword to find the right PCS code instead. The device aggregation table, I find, was really missing for a year or two, and then when they created it, I think it's a very useful table. So you can find the specific device that you're looking for, see exactly which root operations it would ever actually apply to, which body systems that device might actually ever apply to. And then they actually will show you which character you're going to use in the right space for that. So that helps me understand that an epiretinal visual prosthesis can be used with all root operations, but only on the eye, and PCS calls it a synthetic substitute. And that translation is really quite useful. And then finally, there's a substance key for things like substitute skins and things like that, very similar to the device key. So those tables down here at the bottom, if you're keyword searching, you'd find hits in there anyway, and they're going to be a nice little cheat so that what you're using as search terms to browse in the chapters is a little bit easier. Now, the other chapters are set up in a similar but slightly different way depending on where you've landed. So if you go into the imaging chapter, again, imaging is the sort of the chapter. You'll notice body system, and then you'll notice that the third character is the type of radiology being performed, and then the 4th, 5th, and 6th, and 7th characters are a little body part contrast material qualifier. And that just requires that you really get to know the different types of radiology and you use the right kinds of terminology. So It's a computerized tomography, it's a fluoroscopy, and so on and so forth. Okay. So that's the PCS book. And now I want to show you how to use the ICD-10 Explorer tool. I think that it's important, we've learned from all the train the trainer sessions at AHEMA, that we all understand the ecosystem of the ICD-10-CM and the ICD-10 PCS system. We should not become encoder dependent and just search and trust the answers. When we're searching, we need to understand like sort of the chapter and table structure of those codes. But for productivity purposes, it is quite convenient to have a fast search tool. So we've created the ICD-10 Explorer tool for you. This tool works for ICD-9 and ICD-10 codes because most of us are dual coding right now. And it allows you to keyword search or code search. So let's run a couple of examples. If I'm interested in coding for chronic kidney disease, I can type my words in the box. My ICD-9 results will appear on the left. My ICD-10 results will appear on the right. At this point, there's no mapping going on. This just happens to be a search term that appears in both data sets, and we're returning them both on screen. Now, typically, you're going to notice that the right-hand side of the screen is longer. That's usually for two reasons. The first reason is we've put all the instructions on the screen because it's a new code system, and we didn't want you to have to go into the code book to get them. And then often it's because, and we've also got all the synonyms showing. And then often it's simply because there's more I10 codes than I9 codes because of that greater specificity. So I didn't need to map, but I can map if I want. And I'll show you some scenarios there. But first I want to show you these links. At the top, at the category level, you'll see some links. For ICD-9, it's just one link. It takes you into the code book, which will be retired in 15 days. But that allows you to see the I9 coding instruction section notes and the includes and excludes notes. For ICD-10, you'll have three links. The first one takes you into the code book that I already showed you. Your chapter and section instructions will be right there on screen. And you'll see the tabular presentation and the bolded reportable code. You might want to see if there are any local coverage determinations that contain this family of codes. So the LCD link allows you to click and search that instantly. Now I'm going to show you how to tailor your page so that when you do this search, you don't end up with 50 states times 2 for Part A and Part B worth of answers. You actually have access in your MediReg subscription to all 50 states, but you probably only care about one. You can tailor your results so that you're only seeing the state that you're interested in. But what I've essentially done here is you can see the search box right here. I've searched all the local coverage determinations in my preferred jurisdiction for the code N18.*. So that's any code in this family. And then when you expand your search results, you'll notice the active and archived local coverage determinations being returned to you. And for the next 2 weeks, there might be 2 active local coverage determinations. One that contains ICD-10 codes and one that contains ICD-9 codes. But since we came in here from a code search involving only an I-10 code, chances are you're only going to find the I-10 policy. And there have been lots of revisions, even to the I-10 draft policies. So you might notice that the most recent document that doesn't even go live for 2 weeks is actually a high version number. And that's just the way it is. Now you might want also to find some coding guidance related to code N18. And so the guidance library is available to you. If you click on that, you do a keyword search, and you'll find coding clinic articles if you have this level of product, CPT Assistant and CPT Changes articles if they happen to contain that term. You'll also find other references coming out from Medicare that might be really useful to you. So you might find hospital-acquired conditions, Medicare Learning Network, FAQs, quality reporting information. It's a really nice way to quickly surface Medicare information related to this particular code. Okay. So that was a diagnosis code. Let's attempt a procedure. So I have a patient in the hospital, and we've performed a colonoscopy as part of their diagnostics. And I'd like to find the ICD-10 PCS code for colonoscopy. So I search, like I always have, and I notice it on the left-hand side under ICD-9, I find 45.23, which is my usual code. But now I'm coding in ICD-10. I've also found the V or encounter code. Under I-10, the encounter codes all start with a V now. And I found the encounter code for colonoscopy, but not the procedure code. And that's because all the procedure codes now use those root operations. Common vernacular terms like arthroscopy and colonoscopy are just simply not going to be used in the procedure coding system. So now I need to cheat. I'm going to allow myself to click on the green button, which allows me to map. We have all three of the government maps loaded, the backwards GEMS, the forward GEMS, and the reimbursement map. And if you want to narrow to one, you can check one or two of these boxes. But if you leave them all alone, we'll just auto-search all three of them. So I click on this little green map button, and now ICD-10 Explorer has become a mapping tool. And it's telling me that according to Medicare, 45.23 is generally equivalent to 0GJD-ACZ, which is an inspection of the lower intestinal tract. Now, I don't ever stop here. I don't trust GEMS because we know that there are some gaps in those maps. But I do like that I can now try keyword searching again using the term that PCS uses. So I should have been searching, instead of using the word colonoscopy, I should have been searching on the phrase inspection, because that's the root operation, and lower intestinal tract, because that's the body system. And there I find my answers very quickly. And you notice when I keyword searched, I found the entire set, not just the set of codes, not just the ones that were GEMS mapped. So that's a really nice example. Now sometimes in cardiology and pulmonology and places where there are implanted medical devices, the translation from I-9 to I-10 can be really quite profoundly different. So if I'm going to replace a defibrillator, that's no longer one step. It might be many, many, many root operations. And so the GEMS does something a little bit different, and I just want you to be aware of that. So here's my replacement of the leads. Here's my replacement of the actual pulse generator, or both, and I'm going to map. So I-9 had one code, and I-10 now has a bit more complexity here. And you can expand, and you can see that this code actually translates to several different procedure codes so that you can see that mapping. And if you are using any kind of encoder in your system that's doing auto mapping, and they've loaded the backwards GEMS, for instance, this may not help you because it only appears in one of the GEMS files, which is why we try to show you all three of them. So there's that. Now, once I've gotten here, you notice that the code book links aren't present. So again, I don't blindly trust that 37.98 is generally equivalent to only these codes. I think CMS may have missed a few. So I could do the insertion here, or I'm just going to copy the first three codes. So I'm going to instead research using 0GH. And then I'll see that entire list of codes, and I can choose for myself which codes make sense. This is a long list, and I'd really like to actually rely on that table. So I'm going to click on the code book link, and that takes me right into the table. So then I can see all the 0GH codes in that ecosystem that's so important. And I know it was a pacemaker or whatever it was, so I can on screen use my Control F key and search and find the code that I'm looking for. I think that's useful. And let me pause now. Just talked about PCS coding from the codebook perspective and also from the codebook perspective. Does anybody have any questions?
There are currently no questions.
Okay, good. As you don't have to hold your questions to the end. As I'm working, if something comes up for you, go ahead and type it in the box. Now, I would like to see if there's any guidance. Are there any coding clinic articles or other reference material that have come out using this series of codes? So I've just clicked on the guidance link, and now I'm searching the coding guidance library. And sure enough, there's a coding clinic article that I really want to go read about this. Or perhaps I'll find that there is a claims processing issuance that is important for me to understand. So really wonderful that it's so easy to go from your keyword search to your code to the reference material. And then I really want to show you this national coverage determinations kit that I got. I'm going to click on this link, and it's going to open an Excel file that I hope will be easy for me to share on screen. Sometimes WebEx does something a little bit funny. Can everybody see this little spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, so let me tell you where I just went, and I think this is pretty cool. CMS has not traditionally provided coding instructions for their national coverage determinations except for the lab. They made the lab coding manual, but no other manual. As a part of the ICD-9 to ICD-10 transition, they have started to issue in the transmittal system a number of files in which they're explaining what edits they believe should be in place for their national coverage determination. So NCD 20.4 is about implantable automatic defibrillators. And if you read that article, I'd be happy to show it to you. It tells you the indications and limitations of medical necessity, but it doesn't have the codes listed in it. Here, CMS has actually provided us with the codes. From the medical necessity perspective, the ICD-9 diagnosis and the ICD-10 diagnosis codes are here. So this is essentially payer edit instruction. But they've also, in some cases, provided procedure information where you can see, particularly since implanting an automatic defibrillator is typically an inpatient-only procedure, they've actually provided the ICD-9 procedure code and the ICD-10 PCS code. And then they've even got, if you get lucky, they haven't published this for every one of the NCDs, but for some of them, they've even published their rules description, which really kind of gives you some beautiful insight into what kind of edits are going to happen in the claims processing system for these kinds of claims. And in there, you see the Part A CPT codes. So you've got the procedure codes, the diagnosis codes, in ICD-9, ICD-10, and CPT. I think that's a pretty interesting issuance that offers more transparency than anything I've seen before. And if those exist, they do not exist for all LCDs or NCDs, but if they do exist, they will be available for you. And the way I got there was really quite simple. I'll show you two pathways in. The way I got there right now is I was actually looking at a procedure code in ICD-10 Explorer, and all I did was click on the LCDs. Well, frankly, I could have done it from the coding guidance link, and there it is, or the coding guidance link, because the NCDs are in there as well. So that's the PCS coding. We're about a halfway mark. I'd like to move into payment information, and then I'll cover some of the LCDs and NCDs at the end. Okay, so under Lookup and Payment Tools, actually, first I'll tell you about the code book. Under the code book, we do have an MSDRG code book. It looks like this, and it's really here to give you payment information. So if I take a look at DRG 215, I can see that in version 32, which is this current fiscal year, the basic Table 5 information, and we've even provided a Medicare expected payment, national unadjusted, just to give you a sense of what that might be. We have a calculator where you can get your provider-specific payment. This payment book also includes history, so you can go back to previous versions of Table 5. And because DRGs are payable in the long-term care setting as well, you'll see a table of those. We didn't translate those to payment, we just show you the relative weight there. And then there's also a little translation here. Back in the day, we did move over from the old DRGs to the new DRGs, and that translation is here if you ever need it. So that's the payment code book. But often what you're interested in when you're looking at MSDRGs is to have some reveal regarding the diagnosis codes that get you into a particular DRG and the procedure codes that bump you from the medical DRG to the surgical DRG. That's the DRG definitions manual, and it's going to be released shortly. I only have it built in a test environment, but I just want to give you a peek at it. So this is going to be available in the product shortly, and there's an overview. It's set up just like the payment book. It's got all the MDCs. There's an overview page that will show you all the different types of DRG clusters in this chapter or in this major diagnostic category. So there's only one DRG for other heart assist implants, but there's 6 different DRGs for cardiac valve and major cardiothoracic procedures. There's, 6 for coronary bypass. So you can scroll through and see these DRG tables. You'll see 2 links on this page. The words link is going to take you to an overview page. The numbers link is going to take you into that payment code book that I just showed you. So let's go to the words link. So here are all 6 DRGs related to cardiac defibrillator implant. And you see this table, and it helps you identify what the conditions might be that group you into each of those DRGs. I'm going to go back to the contents here. The overview page also includes a series of pages that list all the diagnosis codes that group you into this major diagnostic category. Now, there might not be just one little list, and we couldn't fit them all on one page. So you'll see a page, and at the bottom you'll see the next page, and the next page, and the next page. The real advantage to having this information in the book is keyword searching. So if, I apparently didn't copy that code right. Let me just search for copy a code, 85200. So if you have a diagnosis and you're wondering what the grouper will do to it, you can keyword search in the definitions manual and quickly identify for yourself that this seems to be a code that groups to NDC5, and you can see what tables it appears on. And when you get into those tables, you can see some additional information. So this is a principal diagnosis for other circulatory system DRGs, and there are these 3 DRGs. So this code is going to get you into DRG 314, 315, or 316 if it's the principal diagnosis. If it's a secondary diagnosis, I noticed down here in Appendix G, it's also defined as a complication of comorbidity. So that's going to give me insight into whether or not that particular code used as a secondary diagnosis is going to bump me up. So this is a very convenient tool. The other thing that you might notice in this tool is you can search by procedure code. So let's pick a procedure. And same thing applies. When you search, you'll find whatever pages in the code book contain that code, and you'll get some insight into what the grouper will do. And so this is just a different way to approach the same content. And I also just want to show you the table of contents in general. It has a chapter for each of the major diagnostic categories. And then it has a very useful series of appendix files. A repeat of Table 5, crosswalk, surgical hierarchy, those unrelated operating room procedures that end up grouping you into one of those weird DRGs, the CC list, the MCC list, the HAC list. So very useful new resources. Should come online in about a week. The next resource for MSDRG is the grouper and calculator. And I'll show you how that functions. So if you want to get a general understanding of how the grouper works, use the definitions manual. And if you have an actual case that you want to group and figure out the payment rate for, use the grouper and calculator. Now, I have an upgraded version of MediReg, so I have 2 extra buttons. I'm going to show you the button that everybody has. Everyone has the green calculate button and the blue group button. So the blue group button is a copy of your MSDRG grouper. The fields might look familiar. You probably have one of these in your claims processing system. Only what's nice about this is you can play around in here and validate a claim before actually sending it to the payer, because this isn't connected to your payment system. So there's a lot of options on this screen. I just want to show you what they all are. You can hide payment information and just group to a DRG and see the relative weight. You can do that for claims going back to 1999. Our payment information only goes back 5 years. Or you can show provider information. If you want to calculate for national unadjusted, just click this little link and we'll put in a cheat code. If you want to search for a provider, you've got a search box, and you can just go find whatever provider you'd like. You can search by zip code, name, county, city, and you don't even need to use the search box. If you just start typing, it will auto-suggest the right code for you, right claim provider number for you. Then you can enter all the information about the patient. That's going to include patient demographics, as well as the diagnosis codes and procedures from the actual case. And I'm just going to cheat and click on one of these little links up here so that it will auto-fill. And let me just show you what that looks like. So there's the red highlighted fields are required. You can't run the grouper if you don't put something in that box. So here's a 65-year-old male, discharged today, was in the hospital, let's say, for 3 days. You can either calculate the 3 yourself or put the admit date in and we'll calculate it for you. Medicare is the payer. I'm going to be putting ICD-10 codes in here, so I'm putting ICD-10. And the discharge status is here. Just so you know, the discharge status generally doesn't change the DRG grouping unless the patient dies. In some cases, that will change your grouping. But generally, the discharge status only impacts payment, not grouping. And then you can come down and put in your codes. You have to have an admitting diagnosis, and you have to have a primary diagnosis, otherwise the grouper won't work. Then if there are any additional diagnostic conditions that were revealed during the patient's stay that are documented in the medical record, you can enter those in the additional fields. We only show 5 fields here, but you can actually scroll down and keep going all the way to 25 codes. And then you can even enter the present on admission indicator if you want to have that logic run. Next, if there were any surgical or radiological or diagnostic procedures performed during the patient's stay, you can enter those PCS codes here, and then you click Group and Calculate, and your answers automatically appear downstream. So here is a patient that is grouped to DRG 310. We see some basic information from Table 5. Red text is going to tell you about something you did wrong up above in the entry. You might see here that you've entered an invalid code. You might see that you forgot to fill in a piece of information. And if you didn't fill out all the critical information, you'll get a message that it's ungroupable. Now, the payment information is summarized for you up here. You've got your MSDRG total payment, and then it's broken down into little portions so you can understand capital, operating, pass-through, value-based purchasing, readmission, and hospital-acquired condition. So this is like a little report card for your provider to see if you're getting dinged for those new measurements that we're doing since the Affordable Care Act passed. And then just as a reference, as a benchmark, you're going to see the national unadjusted information here. So I just ran this for national unadjusted so they match, but if you had a provider in here, you'd see that provider-specific information. You can also show a little history, and that will show you a little table that indicates how payment for this provider has changed over time with a nice little graph. No mystery to how we perform the calculation. We actually pull the variables right out of the PC pricer, and we tell you which version of the PC pricer we're running on right here. And if you care, we even show you the full calculation logic. So you can use this tool to build a case, to understand the diagnosis coding, the procedure coding, to validate coding before you submit a claim to Medicare. And when you're doing DRG validation studies, you might notice yourself maybe trying, what would happen if we coded this a little bit different? So maybe the coder put the wrong principal diagnosis in, so I can enter all that information and hit the submit button again. And there you'll see I go to a different DRG now. If you do a lot of DRG validation work, you know what, Lee or Christina, I think if you hit your computer's mute button, we'll remove this echo that I'm hearing. It seems to have just gotten worse. Right when we only have about 15 minutes left.
We're already muted.
Okay, thanks. So you can upgrade. Oh, it just got worse. Your subscription. We have a batch grouper available for you, which allows you to download an Excel file, fill your claims into that Excel file, and upload them all at once to run 200 claims at once. Very useful if you're doing larger validation studies or I-9 to I-10 shift analysis. And then finally, we also just, if you know your DRG and you don't want to start with ICD-10 codes, so for instance, maybe you're in the DRG definitions manual and you notice that these 5 6 DRGs are all sort of in the same family, and you want to do a price comparison or a fee schedule analysis for your department. So I would like to understand the reimbursement rate for DRGs 338, 339, and 340 without having to go through all the coding. So the DRG calculator is specifically for that. And again, you can pick a provider at 338, 339. Let's put them all in. Choose a date, choose a length of stay, and run calculate. And now we're going to do a fee schedule comparison that is provider specific. So if your guest is Real Medical in New York and your patient being discharged today with a DRG 338, your reimbursement rate for that stay will be $30,000 because you've properly documented your major complications. That same appendectomy patient with only simple complications would be $18,000, and that patient without complications or major complications would be $13,000. So both of those tools are available for you to support your ICD-10 work in 2016, and this new definitions manual will be coming online in about a week. Let me pause for a second. I just gave you a lot of information. I really assume that we have reimbursement professionals on the phone who understand all those acronyms that I just used. Does anybody have any grouper or calculator or reimbursement-related DRG questions for me? There are no questions at this time? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of other resources available in your MediRite subscription and focus in on the alerting and a little bit on the local and national coverage determinations based on your tailored page. So I do want to point out that under Codebooks and Guidance, when I was in ICD-10 Explorer, I was clicking to search the Guidance for Coders library, but it's actually a browsable reference for you over here on the left under Codebooks and Guidance. Click on the link that says Guidance for Coders, and there you have a search box that follows you in, and now you can search on your own. So we pre-populate those searches by code, but now if you wanted to, you could just search as you wish and find information. ICD-10 related information is going to be peppered throughout this particular library. Coding Clinic, frequently asked questions from CMS. We also have this folder from CMS. This is a copy of everything CMS has published on their ICD-10 page, where you can go to get the raw data files if you just want the code set yourself. There's also excellent provider and payer resources in here, including action plans and really fantastic training materials. CMS has issued free webinars, free audio calls, lots of PowerPoint presentations, and even click-through training materials on a learning management system that are free. And so before you go creating resources on your own, you might just check out what they have for you here. Hospital-acquired conditions are ICD related, so you're going to see that ICD-10 information showing up in there. We've seen a lot of medical learning network information coming out from CMS related to ICD-10. We have your code books here. The outpatient code editor is going to show up with ICD-10 CM codes and showing you those edits that are in place for your outpatient claims, like gender-specific edits, age-specific edits. The Medicare code editor manual is part of the DRG code book as well. That's for the inpatient edit. We monitor and track what the RACs and CMS are up to on the audit side, and guaranteed, if there's a new thing, the RACs are going to be auditing it in a couple of years. So we'll start to see ICD-10 information showing up in here. And you also have your Medicare manual, as well as your key code books and the Federal Register. Now, let me tell you what we do with the code books because the change of the year is occurring right now. We have a current year book. It's the thing that you can get to when you go to the left-hand side and you click on this, the most common link over here. So if I click on ICD-10 CM right now, since it's still fiscal year 2015, I'm going to go to the 2015 book. But today I actually want to go to 2016 and do research there. So you're going to see the pre-release book appearing in the guidance library. That's true for CPT and HCPCS sometime in December as well. So we'll pre-release those books as soon as we can. The other thing I want to point out to you is the rule. So what we notice every year is that there's a proposed rule and then a final rule. And from the reimbursement side, it's actually quite important to really get a good grasp of the IPPS proposed rule because there are changes in the grouper logic and changes in payment logic. And we've made an ebook out of that so that you don't have to open the entire 1,200-page article. You can go into just the subsection that you want. The proposed rule is up in ebook format. The final rule has been published. We don't have the ebook made yet, but it'll be out shortly. And then also, my understanding of the rule every year also involves taking a deep dive into some of the extra data files that CMS publishes. So we put copies of those in here as well. So this is going to give you one location where you can come in and see what's changed and search across the proposed rule, the final rule, and all the data files and get that discussion coming out from Medicare. And that's available in the guidance library at the bottom so that when you're keyword searching from the ICD Explorer or in here manually, you'll find a hit if there's new information being discussed on the regulatory side. And then finally, we really need to underscore how important it is to take a look at the benefit policy, national coverage, and claims processing manuals right now. Major sections have been rewritten. There have been thousands of updates, literally 3,000 updates to Pub 100.04, many of them in the last year, as CMS gets ready for ICD-10. And so when you come into the manual, I want you to recognize that they're browsable by book, by chapter, and subsection. When we have a section that's changed, the highlighted dates at the top of the screen will alert you to the fact that this page has undergone some kind of revision. The paragraph inside the text will alert you to the last update to the next bit of information that's about to show up on screen. The PDF links take you to the original transmittals that made those changes. The red text on screen is what's been shifted. What was the recent revision? The last revision to this was transmittal 3227. Sadly, it was issued in 2015 and effective 2 years prior. 3 years prior, that happened. And so you can see what was changed. And if you have the need to go back and see what this section used to look like, just jump to the bottom of the screen where you'll see a table that shows you the section revision history. So you can't get to this on the Medicare website, but we've kept every copy of every revised section in all the Medicare manuals. So you can dial back in time by jumping to the bottom of that page. And a lot of changes have occurred in response to ICD-10. So it's important to get familiar with your key Medicare manuals and reference those sections and read that language. Sometimes there's actually a discussion of the specific ICD code, but more often they're just discussing a more general policy. And so if you're going to search the manuals, we would recommend you use keywords instead of codes. If you code search, you might get lucky. But if you code search and you don't find anything, don't assume that's because there isn't any information. Try keyword searching or browsing instead. Make sure you found the right information. And then lastly, I want to show you the national coverage determination. They're here in the guidance library. There's 2 copies of the NCDs. There's Pub 100.03, which is set up like a traditional manual and is actually quite awkward to use. I like the NCD collection better because in there, each individual national coverage determination is set up as a single individual policy document. And you can get to that in the guidance library. You can also get to it when you click on the LCDs and NCDs on the left. And there's a hyperlink right here. And when you're in this search box, every state library also includes the NCDs. So you would be searching the NCDs along with the LCDs automatically at the same time. So let me just take you into the National Coverage Determinations database. There's a table here at the top that I find very helpful because you can sort by effective date, update, and coverage topic. And some NCDs really haven't been updated for a very, very long time. And so the language on the screen might be quite different than the language that the clinician is currently using. And also the language can be quite fair. So here I am looking at an NCD about cardiac pacemakers, and there's really not much information in here. And so your keyword searches might not be that fruitful, but browsing in here can be very helpful. So here's an NCD on cardiac pacemakers. The red text was what was changed recently. There's the revision history. There's some other related information that you might want to read. Notice there's no codes here. And so traditionally the NCDs did not contain codes. However, because CMS has come out with a couple of transmittals issuing those coding guidelines, we've created an index and a folder so that when you're in here and you want to know R1199 OTN of those transmittals that have come out with those coding guidelines attached. So the local coverage determinations, last thing I want to talk about, depend upon you tailoring your page. So when you first subscribed to MediRegs, we gave you this nice, maybe 150 folders full of content, a bunch of libraries, and you may not need them all, and particularly probably don't need all 50 states. So if you've noticed that your daily email alerts and your LCD searches just return this huge list of information, you can fix that very quickly. It's called tailoring your page. There's a link to it right here in this big red warning. You can also get to that link on the Welcome tab under the Settings link. So in here, you can remove any content you want from your scope. So if you're not interested in research compliance, you can turn it off. And down here, you can uncheck all and turn on just the state that you want. Now, if you are interested in national, I want you to know that there are 12 max jurisdictions and 50 states. You don't need to keep all 50 states on. What you might do is turn on one state for each of the 12 max jurisdictions. Then you'll have a representation of what Noridian and NGS and Palmetto are up to without having to see all that redundancy. And I can suggest those to you in an article if you'd like. And then if you have one of our upgraded products, you'll also have the Medicaid library. You need to do that selection there as well. So please tailor your page so that when you come to the LCDs and NCDs and you search, you're not having to look at a wall of answers from so many different payer jurisdictions. And my screen decided to freeze on that search. I apologize, but this search box gets smarter once you tailor your page. I'm going to just jump back to my PowerPoint, make sure I didn't miss anything critical. Down here is your list of coverage articles that I want you to see, R1199OTN and 1388 and so on. And then let me just remind myself of the agenda today. The last thing I wanted to talk about was setting up a stored search. Glad I checked. Okay. So we add content to the product throughout the day. You know that. And you get your daily email alert from us every day. If it's too big, you tailor your page, it gets smaller automatically. Yay for you. But I sometimes notice that there's a document, and I can't tell if this document is actually about ICD-10 or not. The title just isn't that informative, and I don't really want to have to read every single document that shows up in my daily alert. So I'm going to go to Special Searches, Browse Content, and I can use this search box here, but I'm going to click on the Advanced Search instead and allow myself to keyword search for a concept, a phrase, a code, whatever it is that I want. I can search titles only, I can search all my text, or just search a certain bit of content. And so let me see if my state, my favorite payer, the OIG, CMS, and the guidance library have anything related to ICD-10. And I want the most relevant documents. So I'm going to search for only documents that say ICD-10 right in the title. So I search. Here are all the documents so far in just those 4 libraries that say ICD-10 right in the title. So if you feel like it's been hard for you to keep up, you're paying attention. And if we actually read the text, all the paragraphs, all the sections, this list gets very, very big. So that's a good idea to understand what's come out in the past. But what I'd really like to do is have MediRegs inform me next week when a brand new document comes out that says ICD-10. So all I'm going to do is run a search like this, and then accept this invitation at the top of the screen to store it, name it, and set it up as a weekly or daily automatic alert. So using this feature, you can actually have MediRegs read your what's new and elevate the document to contain your favorite search terms directly to you so that you don't have to read everything that we send you. And I'm happy to offer you a free custom training to dig in deeper on that if you need it. So I'm out of time. Christina, did any questions show up in the panel?
No, there are no questions, Rael.
Perfect. So thank you very much for joining me. If you need specialized training for your team, that is always available to us. I'll be sending out a link to the recording of this session as soon as it's available, as well as the slides. And if there's anything else that we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can always reach us on the Welcome tab under the Support area, dial the phone, or send us an email, and we'll get back to you right away. Thank you for your time.